Hello and welcome to round 11 of the MotoGP-Xtra Podcast. Joining me as always is Reese, aka Biker Gaming. So this will be our last podcast before the 5-week summer break. But we have a cracker today. We are at Assen, the Dutch TT. 3 races, 3 controversial, entertaining, dramatic. What did you make of Assen as a whole before we get into the individual races?
Well, it was a really good weekend, and I know you guys are going to be so sad that you're not going to hear us for 5 weeks. You're gonna miss us so much. But yeah, it was really good because I think there's been the last few rounds. There's been at least one of the races from all 3 classes has been kind of boring in some way, but this time that wasn't the case. They were all interesting from start to finish. Even Moto 2, in fact, Moto 2 felt like a Moto 3 race. MotoGP, well, that'll go down in history, I reckon, as one of those like races. But of course, don't want to talk about it too much before we properly get into it. But yeah, it was just an amazing weekend of racing, so enjoyable, and at probably the best track in the world as well, Assen. So you can't really ask for much more.
Yeah, I completely agree. Now we're going to jump in always to Moto 3. Friday, a washout, heavy rain, lots of crashing, similar to 2013 when Lorenzo broke his collarbone, just an absolute flood everywhere. Not much action on Friday, kind of written off over that. Saturday, we had some interesting dry times. A lot of the riders were slightly behind on their weekend schedule because of that, so that made Sunday pretty much open territory for everyone. So we're going to start off with the Moto 3 race. Reece started with a big group, as it usually does. What did you make of the opening couple of laps in Assen?
Opening couple of laps, pretty much your standard Moto 3 race, especially at Assen, because the track is so fast. They're on the throttle so much, the slipstream is worth so much time. They all started in a big group, but like you were saying, it was very much a washout on Friday. Saturday, everybody was kind of on the back foot, so I think it really did show which riders and which teams have the best base setting, are the best riders, are the best teams, because yes, it started off with the big group, everybody was able to keep with the slipstream, but as soon as there was like maybe a pass or something that would break up the group slightly, that allowed then sort of the group of 5 to pull away. Obviously Guevara once again leading from the front, and I've got to say he looks so good. Obviously it didn't quite go his way today, and we'll come to that later, but he's looking so fast, so unbelievable. I mean, it was the same top people, to be fair, that have been there pretty much week in, week out at the front of the field that managed to pull that gap away from the large group that was there from the beginning of the race. It was basically the main KTMs and then the 2 Leopards. So I think again it definitely continues that theme of the fact that Honda are struggling a lot this year in the class, because this is a track where you would have Honda written all over it, and once again, you know, it was only the Leopards, and that's just because they have such good straight line speed.
Yeah, and just to add a bit more drama to it, it was an absolute washout Saturday night, and a lot of riders throughout all classes did complain, or mention more than complain, about how green the track was Sunday morning for the warm-up and how little rubber there was laid down for all 3 races. But moving on into the race, we had, of course, the 5 that pulled away. We had a Foggia long lap. A minor mistake. At any other track, you'd probably only get a warning for this, whereas Assen, he didn't really drop the time. I can see it. Slightly harsh, and in the end, it did affect his race and what happened to him with unfortunately collecting a curb. What did you make of his long lap and then the incident with Monroe?
Yeah, I got to agree. It was quite a harsh long lap, but we always know every time you come to Assen, they're very harsh at the last chicane, any cutting. I think that's courtesy of a certain incident that happened there. Was it about 7 years ago now?
7 years ago now, yeah.
Oh, that makes me feel old. But yeah, that was. They're always very harsh there. They were pretty harsh on Foggia because it was pretty tight, but he didn't do what he was supposed to do. You are supposed to drop a bit of time or lose a couple of places, and he didn't do either of those, so that's why he got the penalty. So yeah, a bit harsh, but those are the rules. So that's how it works, and of course that actually led to his demise in the end, didn't it? He was having a battle. Was it Munoz that had put the pass on him? And
yeah, it was, because he was the one that started the whole charades of crashes.
Yeah, I got to say, Munoz, he is impressing me. Obviously, he did make a bit of a mistake on that last lap, but he looked very good up until that point. I kept thinking that, considering how young he is, he's been aggressive but very fair. But yeah, it was. It went wrong for Foggia there. Obviously, he ran a bit wide. He probably could have kept on the track, to be honest, but again, you know, wild kid coming up the inside, you're technically, I guess, still fighting for the championship, you are going to be a bit careful. And yeah, he crashed over the curb. And to be honest, that's not really Fogger's fault. I think that probably needs to be looked at, actually, because we also saw a similar thing later on, which obviously we'll come on to later. But it was, yeah, it's a bit too steep. There's too much of a drop there. It should be a bit more of a sloped. Like, you shouldn't be able to drop off the edge of a curb. I don't know if we've mentioned it in the past, but it has been issues at other tracks previously. I think Misano is quite bad for it on some of the corners, like the curbs, you just drop straight off them, and that is quite dangerous. There's a reason why the green is there in the tarmac runoff. Yes, you're not supposed to go on it, but it's there to stop you falling off, and the curb needs to be pretty flush with that. So that's something I reckon they'll talk about on the safety commission, because that was really unfortunate for Foggia, because at any other track he would 100% got away with that, but just because the curb the way it was just threw him off. And I got to say, that has got to be the end of Foggia's title campaign. I believe I said that last time he fell off as well, but really, that is it now. There's no way he's winning this championship. The two Gas guys look so strong. You've got Messia there a lot of the time as well. So he's got to make a lot of points to a lot of people. It's not like it's a 1v1 like last year with Acosta, and Acosta started to sort of choke towards the end of the season. I think this is it for Foggia, and he might have to end up sticking in Moto3 for another season, try and take that championship again. Although, to be honest, I don't think there's really going to be a lot of changes for next year anyway in terms of riders. So he's got another shot next year. I think he's just going to focus on trying to maybe get some race wins now for the rest of the season. But I reckon his title charge is over.
Yeah, I agree with some aspects. I'll get to the bits in a minute I don't agree. I agree that his championship was over. I think we've been saying that every week he crashes. We said it Mugello. We've said it every week. Oh, yeah, it's done now, this, that, and the other. It's halfway through the season, and he's not really shown anything of what he showed last year. He shows it on Friday and Saturday, can't do it on the Sunday for whatever reason. Going to the curb, actually, sorry, I will say that I do believe Moto3 will pretty much stay the same for next year. We'll have a couple probably come up from CIV and from Red Bull rookies, but there won't be many move up to Moto2. If you think like the front 3 or 4, most of them are pretty young. With a couple of older riders might move up, but there won't be any of the top 4, maybe you'd say, will move up, I reckon. So it'll be pretty much same riders on pretty much the same equipment next year. Now, going back to Foggia's incident with Munoz, I wholeheartedly agree the curb, it's a step. It shouldn't be that way, no. I agree it shouldn't be completely flush or flat. I believe a small kind of a step, but that was like a curb on the side of a footpath, like pavement size. Like, he got such airtime when sideways. It was a pretty ugly crash. But I also believe it was his fault for the crash, and I'll explain this now. In MotoGP, we saw Fabio have the exact same kind of incident where he kind of went deep. He sat it up, squared it off in a curb, and lost time to the rider in front. Moto3 is all about momentum. I guarantee Foggia was thinking, right, I've been pushed wide here. If I try and sit this up and square it off, I'm going to lose more time. I'm going to go off track, come back on, use the excuse I was pushed. And then, unfortunately, as he rejoined, he had the moment. I think it was more Foggia's fault for the crash because of that. The move from Munoz wasn't anything crazy, as we saw later in the race, but I would put a bit more blame on Foggia thinking of trying to, for want of a better phrase, cheat the system by saying, "Whoa, well, I was pushed, but I also pinned it, ran off track, ran back on track to use the momentum of the off track to kind of lunge back up the next corner or stay right there for the slipstream out of the hairpin." So I reckon if he squares off, loses an extra 2/10, he's still in the race, whereas running off track, he obviously didn't, like we saw later with Sam as we'll get to, he took a lot more care as other riders did afterwards. But for me, it was a bit naive that he went off track and thought he could come back that quickly. He was trying to use it as a bit of a cheat, and that's the way I look. It'll be interesting to see what you think of that opinion.
Yeah, I gotta say that is a fair argument. He was obviously trying to keep the advantage. I mean, he could have stayed off the track longer and come back on where the curb is less raised as well, if he wanted to, just actually get back on the track, or he could have squared it off on the curb. We obviously saw a bit of an incident at that same corner in World Superbikes. I mean, it was a completely different type of incident, but again, it was to do with whether you stay on the curb or whether you actually just run off the track, and I guess Foggia made the wrong decision on this occasion. But yeah, I'd say that is a fair argument. I hadn't really considered that, but yeah, it probably. I still lean towards the fact that he shouldn't have crashed for that. It shouldn't be like that. But yeah,
the issue shouldn't have happened in the first place. I agree. Yeah, I think we both agree on that. But moving on swiftly, and we're going to move on from a brilliant and a day that has finally come. Ayumu Sasaki getting a win. He was on pole. He was injured. We didn't know if he could do it. He should have done it weeks and months ago. Crazy Boy finally gets his first win. What did you make of his performance in Assen?
Well, things finally came together for him, and I'm very, very happy for him. He's been there or thereabouts. He's looked really good this season, almost a different rider. I mean, we've seen glimpses in the past. In his Tech 3 days, he was there or thereabouts some weekends. Him and Onchu would often come from a bit further back, and you'd be like, oh, it's the Tech 3 boys again, causing some trouble at the front. But yeah, he's been really good this year, right from the start, right in Qatar. I mean, think back to the heartbreaker Qatar. It seems like such a long time ago now, how he was so far out in front. He'd got that race won. He was miles clear. But then obviously he had that issue where, he had, did we get to the conclusion it was like a mechanical problem that caused him to sort of high side a little bit?
Yeah.
He broke his fairing, and then that was race over for him, sadly. That's obviously one occasion. Le Mans as well comes to mind. He was leading right until like the last corner. He didn't go defensive enough and lost the win. So it's finally come together for him. The chips fell his way on the final lap because he's had the pace all year to win. And in Moto3, if you are good enough, you get to a point where, all right, yes, the top riders do win more because they place themselves in a better position on the final lap. But there is an element of luck to it. Sasaki tends to get pretty unlucky, and actually on this occasion he got pretty lucky with how it played out for him. So yeah, finally coming Sasaki's way. Really, really happy for him. Really, really deserved. And yeah, like I said, he's been showing the pace for a while, so it's good that he's finally got that win and he's got the monkey off his back now.
Yeah, he's such a unique riding style in Moto3, so small, and he carries so much corner speed that I reckon, obviously he had the bad crash Mugello, I reckon that would have been another chance for him to win. High corner speed, flow, he's very wheels in line, he's very, very good to watch, and he's interesting to see how he gets on. Now that he has the monkey off the back, like you said, can he push on? Can he pretty much do what we thought Fodgy would do, which is build on, if he can put a good series of races together for the last 9 and then come back next year and kind of put a title challenge in. Realistically, if it wasn't for, again, like we say, bad luck and injuries, he'd probably be one of the, if you take the Foggias, the Garcia and Guevara, Messia, you'd probably throw him in there that he would be thereabouts for the championship. He's been there every race, barred the odd one with injury. So next year, I don't see any reason why, if he continues with that team, which I believe he will, they seem to have a very good bond. I don't see why he can't push hard for the title. Whether he'll be able to do it up against Guevara and Garcia, I don't know. They're two wily cats in that category, but I definitely think he has a good future in the Moto3 class. But we're going to move on now to slightly before that. We had John McPhee and co. They bridged the gap. John McPhee actually brought a couple of riders forward into the gap. There was a bit of a gap appeared in the front of the field, but McPhee, who was up with them, got pushed back, went forward, went back, kind of a typical John McPhee race. Managed to get his head down on a tyre he wasn't comfortable with. He was saying all weekend he was having a bit of chatter with the software. Was forced into using the hard in the race, even though he said he had very little feeling. And was actually set the fastest ever Moto3 lap around there. So obviously wasn't riding too bad overall. Managed to bridge a gap. And then unfortunately we had the last lap where, well, Reese, I'll let you take away what happened with the last lap.
Well, it's a bit of a trait at this point, isn't it? Well, I'll talk quickly about it bridging the gap. Obviously, he bridged the gap. He brought Artigas with him, and actually Garcia, who was worth noting, he was kind of struggling all weekend. He didn't really have the pace. He dropped away from the group, and it was like, oh, he's in trouble. But he got brought back with McPhee, and then in the end, it really played out well for Garcia because he ended up on the podium. So what was actually looking like a really, a bit of a tough weekend for him, he ended up having a bit of a Vietti weekend where everything fell into his lap right at the end, and he managed to turn a bad weekend into a good one. But yeah, on the last lap, obviously there was actually 2 separate incidents. Initially, it did look from first glance like it was probably one incident, but it was not. It was 2 different incidents. Munoz going at the inside of Messia, crazy move into the bolt, really. A little bit of an experience there. Like I was saying earlier, he's been quite impressive to me because he's been pulling aggressive passes, but it's never been something I think that's over the line. It never looks like he's going to crash underneath someone. It's just aggressive but fair. A little bit like Garcia in that aspect, but this occasion he pushed it a bit too hard, completely wiped out Messia, and then John McPhee just sort of crashed in sympathy. It kind of looked like he got took out initially, but when you see it back, he was nowhere near them. So yeah, John McPhee crashing on the last lap or crashing in the front group is something we've come to expect. I think he just, I don't know, maybe he did just get distracted slightly by the crash, and it does happen. We've seen it happen many times in the past, but you think someone with that level of experience wouldn't fall into that trap. So it's a shame for him because he probably could have actually maybe tried to snatch the podium right at the end there, but unfortunately he ended up in the gravel instead of in the champagne.
Yeah, it's actually, I've watched this back a few times because I also had the same thought. Maybe he was right behind them and kind of just, it was a reflex, but he actually was behind Guevara, and Guevara was taking a wider line, probably maybe trying to set himself up for the run to the line. And it happens right in front of him. He has a small kind of, you can kind of see he just sits his body up on the bike kind of as a bobble. But McPhee actually wasn't that close, so I put more blame on, I don't think it was much to do with the crash. Now, of course, you can say maybe he was going, oh, geez, that's an aggressive move. Maybe I can get up the inside and just release the brake a bit too early. 1 mile an hour, 1 extra degree of lean, and that was the crash. Maybe it could have been that. It's like a top-level motorsport. It's these fine details that can be between ending in the gravel in the last lap and getting a podium. So I reckon it was probably something like that he could see the two of them were not going to make the corner. And maybe he just thought, all right, I'm going to try and capitalise, try and launch into them because I can be strong in the final sector. He was pretty strong in the final sector, so it could have been out to that. It could have been just an innocent mistake we won't really know for quite a while. But that pretty much covers Moto 3. It was a long race. It flew by in a flash, bashing people, crashing, racing, everything had it all really. It was a great race. But we're going to move on to Moto 2 now, which usually is a shorter segment in our podcast. Usually there's, we talk about the winner, we talk about that guy that shouldn't have won and all this, but we actually have a pretty interesting Moto 2 race. I really enjoyed it. I actually felt like this one went quicker than Moto 3. I think Moto 3 always goes slightly quick, whereas Moto 2 you can kind of go, Jesus, there's 13 laps left and there's 6 seconds between the top 7, so it can kind of get like that, whereas it was, again, the mystic of Assen, you could say, just keeps everyone together, just aligns everything. It's a brilliant track. But we're going to start off with Sam Lowe's front row, P3. Didn't get the best start, but then had a weird turn 1. I've watched it so many times, I still don't understand exactly. And unfortunately, as we always do, we record pretty much within a couple of hours of the MotoGP race, so we can never really get updates on things that happen. Usually it's either late at night or the following morning before you find these things out, so we don't know exactly what happened with his start and then his unfortunate crash a couple of laps later. What did you make of Sam, and have you heard anything on what went wrong with his Sunday?
It was a bit of a weird one. His actual initial launch was pretty good, actually, which was something he struggled with in the past, but lately he's actually been quite good at. He definitely worked on that. His initial launch was fine. He was going down towards the first corner. Lopez made a pretty late move, but it was completely fair, and there was still plenty of room for Sam to stay on the circuit. He seemed to just sit up and overreact. I'm not sure whether maybe he hit a neutral or something because he got distracted. I don't know, because it was so strange. He just sat up and went completely straight. Like when, it was an aggressive pass up his inside, and he did have to sit up a little bit to not get hit, but he didn't need to sit up to the degree he did, and he also didn't need to leave the circuit in the way he did. And then even when he left the track, he was going really slow on the tarmac and didn't sort of rejoin immediately, which, yes, I know, probably he saw what happened to Foggia and also didn't want to rejoin into a pack dangerously, which, again, fair enough and quite admirable, but he seemed to take it excessively slow. He probably could have sort of just rejoined on the outside and sort of shuffled his way through a little bit instead of going all the way to the back of the grid. And then, of course, he made a couple of positions and he ended up crashing. They did show him very briefly, and I thought he looked really slow. Because I was kind of expected that he might end up crashing, trying to come through the pack. But he looked slow when they showed him, I thought. And then, 2 corners later, he was down. So, really bizarre. I've not heard anything. I did watch Checkered Flag. They didn't go and talk to him, because I don't think I think they knew he probably wouldn't want to be bothered. So, they didn't bother going to talk to him, because he'd had, obviously, another bad weekend. So, not sure what happened. Maybe it was a bike mechanical, but that's probably just being a bit... just trying to give him a bit of a get out of jail free card there, because it was so bizarre. I don't really understand what he was doing if it wasn't a failure. But even still, he crashed on his own accord anyway. Whatever happened, I assume we haven't seen the crash, but yeah, he would have probably come straight out and said it was a failure if it was a failure that caused the crash. So yeah, just another weird incident for Sam Lowe's. They always seem to happen to him.
Yeah, exactly that. No, you made a great point actually about the potential false neutral. Sam has been probably the most affected by these for whatever he rides. He seems to get them a lot. It doesn't get them frequently, but he gets them more frequently than everyone else. And now that I kind of play it back in my head, yeah, you could say he got a false neutral and just decided, right, I'm not going to make this corner. I'm going to just run it on, because he's not in deep. He's not like the passes a turn one, lap one pass. It's someone goes to the inside. It's kind of what you expect is something that you'd get in every other racing. It wasn't like a dive bomb like Tatai in Sachsenring. It was just a regular, got the run, I'm going to just brake when you do, I'm going to match you into turn one, I'm going to take your position. But he just didn't tip in, and the way he ran on, the more I think about, the more false neutral is a high possibility if he didn't have another issue with the bike, of course. But it was I believe had to be some sort of bike issue. Like, I can't see why he wouldn't just tip in, because he hadn't, like, nowhere, there was nothing wrong with his run to the turn one. He didn't brake stupidly late. You know when riders brake stupidly late, because you can see them gaining on everyone else or pulling out in front of everyone else, and there was nothing like that. So it's, again, until we find out from the horse's mouth, it's going to be speculation of rider error or some sort of bike mechanical. But right now, judging just by the way the bike kind of runs on, a false neutral would be a fairly good shout there, in fairness. But we're going to move on now to a big group at the front. We had 8 riders in that, and a certain Lopez, who was the one that passed Sam into turn one, had the lead for a while. Then we have battling at the front with Augusto Fernandez. Shorter was leading, and then he wasn't leading. What did you make of the kind of opening couple of laps after it all settled down and the top 8 kind of started to pull on the rest of the field?
Well, it was just super interesting to see such a big pack. I was just thinking, what is going on here? I kind of have a bit of a feeling that I think Schrotter had got to the front. I think Schrotter maybe was kind of holding everybody else back a little bit, and then he crashed, so it kind of makes sense. I think maybe he probably didn't quite have the pace of the other guys, was really pushing on, ended up just crashing. It's such an easy crash to do at the Strubben as well. It's just so easy to fold the front there, and he just slid out, and you could tell he's been a little bit better the last few races, to be honest, Schrotter. He's always been a guy that's there or thereabouts in the top 10. You know, the Germans, they always perform well at Sachsenring, but also here at Assen, maybe he's found something with the bike, so it's nice to see. But unfortunately, he did crash from the lead. I'm sure he'll be back in the next race. And it was quite impressive to see how he overtook Lopez and how he was leading the pack, but I think he was potentially holding them back. But it was such a big group. It obviously had the 2 gas bikes in there as well, so Aspar already performing in both classes now. Obviously, they've been really fast in Moto3 the last couple of years. Moto2, they've kind of been there, like Canet was there last year on the speed up. Arenas didn't really do a lot last year. But then this year, Dixon and Arenas have both been very, very fast. So it's the gas team doing very well there. There was the IO bike, obviously the only IO bike. It's actually probably worth noting, we haven't even mentioned it at all, that Pedro Acosta wasn't here because he broke his leg during a motocross crash in training. So that was a main contender out. Aaron Canet was also out of the race. Obviously, he had he's still having major issues with his nose. It's bleeding so much, and it's quite concerning, really. I don't think he should have been probably permitted to ride in Sachsenring at this point, to be honest, because he'd been knocked out and his nose was constantly bleeding. But yeah, so a little bit concerning for Canet. Back to the actual race, but I just thought we hadn't mentioned that at all. Actually, it was a really strange group because they were kind of all sat there. It wasn't like a proper Moto3 scrap. It was a bit more of a controlled Moto2 scrap at the beginning, but it spiced up a little bit. Once Schrotter kind of crashed, people were kind of getting a little bit more ready to make some moves. Obviously, Lopez was putting some harsh moves in because he dropped back and then came back through again and then dropped back again. Dixon and Arenas were going at it a little bit. Those two don't really get on. They're obviously trying to be top dog in the team. So yeah, it was a nice little fight. Not quite Moto3 level, but much better than usually to get to Moto2.
Yeah, and again, fair points mentioning Canet wasn't in, and poor Pedro Acosta breaking his femur. A bad bone to break. It's one of those ones that take a long time. He mightn't even be back for Silverstone, which of course is 5 weeks away from today. But it's one of those bones you break, and it just takes time. There's no way of rushing it. A lot of riders come back after a week from broken wrist, Alex Rins, collarbones. You come back and they'll ride with pain. They'll ride kind of drugged up. Femur, you just don't have any structural strength there. So unfortunately, that will knock him back a couple of weeks. It'll lose a lot of experience on the bike. The best thing for him to happen now, going into 5 weeks, he'll be fairly fit towards the end of it. Whether he'll be race fit, we don't know yet. And we do wish Pedro a speedy recovery, and also to Aaron Canet. But after Schrotter went down, like we said, it kind of started to fan out a bit. Then we had a few riders, a lot of championship contenders struggling. Vietti, once again, looking flaky. Igora looked like he had a plastic bottle for a rear tyre. He had 3 moments. He had one at the back end of the track, just lit the rear up over the bars, did extremely well to stay on. Then he had one of the worst things you can have as a rider is when you go to tip into the corner and the rear just comes round off throttle. It just is one of the most things that saps confidence the most. It's just you've done nothing wrong. I know it's kind of like a running joke that we go, oh, he's done nothing wrong. You genuinely do. The rear tyre isn't up to speed. Now, I have a few theories that maybe Igor is a little lighter, doesn't put the load through the tyres, which in turn doesn't heat them up as much. But then also, and we'll get to in a second, his last couple of laps were amazing. Maybe he doesn't wear the tyres as much, so kind of Danny Pedrosa syndrome there a small bit. But when he did get the tyres up to temperature, he was amazing and had a great comeback. And in the end, finished P2. Joint level with the championship lead, I believe, or else he's 1 point off, and Augusto Fernandez and Vietti are level. So 3-man fight for the title. Igor is my man for the title at the moment, judging on just how consistent he is compared to the other two. What was your thoughts on his amazing comeback?
It was amazing, really, because he was sort of off the back, like in that front group, and then he had the first moment, dropped back to about 10th, had the other moment, then dropped back a little bit further, and had another, and dropped back to about 17th. And you think, at this point, it's Moto2, it's very difficult to pass. We've seen in the past, if you get a bad start, Acosta back in Qatar, or same with Aldeguer, they couldn't get through the pack very well. I mean, to be fair, Acosta did do a pretty good job that day, but he only managed to get back up to like 10th or so. But Agora he just suddenly appeared all of a sudden, like he was slowly making progress. To be fair, same with Vietti, really. They were both down in about 10th place or so at one point, and they sort of just came through together. They caught up to the pack, they started cutting their way through that pack, and it was just amazing ride for Agora. He had so much pace. He would have won the race pretty easily, I would have thought, if he didn't have the massive moment, because he came all the way back from 17th up to 2nd place and was challenging Fernandez right to the end. It looked like he maybe did just run out of tyre a little bit at the end. He did seem to be struggling a little bit more, but I suppose that's because he had to push so much. He was obviously struggling to get the heat in. Once he finally got the heat in, his 17th place, he had to go for it. It did seem like on the last lap or so he was struggling. He had a couple of little moments in front of Jake Dixon. But yeah, it was really good ride for Agora. Like you say, the championship really, really close now because Vietti didn't do too bad in this race, to be fair. He was only a couple of places behind Agora. Fernandez really has built his championship back up a bit. So it is close. Those two joint with Agora in 3rd place. I think it is hard to call. Agora definitely is the most consistent, but I feel like Fernandez, pace-wise, is faster. So I'm not 100% sure. I feel like it's between those two more than Vietti. I think Vietti's going to start to slip back a little bit now. But yeah, it is definitely tough to call. Probably would maybe lean towards I just based on that consistency. Because, Fernandez can win as many races as he wants, but then if he falls off in another one, then Agora could get all those points back. And that's what it kept Agora in the Moto3 title hunt a couple of years ago. So yeah, it's looking like a close championship, but it is going to be, I think, quite hard to call because they're all looking quite good, the top guys.
Yeah, and I pretty much agree wholeheartedly with your summary of the top three. I do feel like we need to remember this is Vietti's 2nd year in the class. Now, I know Igora isn't a veteran or any case, but they're fighting a guy that's been there for many years. He's winning races back as far as 2019. So he's been there a bit. He has plenty of experience of the 3-cylinder Triumphs. And overall, he's just been in that class. He has that experience. It's kind of the time now where you go, yeah, Augusto's been there. He's now got the right team. It is kind of that Remy Gardner kind of situation. He's been there. He's kind of had moments over the last 3, 4, 5 years, and now it's going to come together to one season, and he's going to become champion. But with Vietti, I still think he's at the moment compared to them, he's definitely missing something. Whether it's outright pace, I think it's more of a qualifying thing. He can't really seem to qualify well. He never really seems to be on the front row to give himself a decent chance in the race. He usually comes through, so he seems to have that kind of VR46 Academy kind of never kind of out of the race. He'll always seem to battle his way through, so that is kind of golden when it comes to a champion. That is something they all have, that kind of be able to cut through a pack. Augusto Fernandez, like I mentioned, he's in the IO team now. They just churn out champions left, right, and centre. It's just the team you want to be in if you're a Moto2 rider going for the title. I wouldn't be surprised if he kind of just wins races, finishes P3, P2 wins throughout the season, and maybe just pips I. But right now, judging on how quick and how consistent, he's just a little emperor. He's just so good, and just his riding style is so good. The amount of saves he has, and then not to forget that we will be going to Asia, so you'd expect him to have a couple of good races towards his region of the world. So at the moment, I'm going to put it just slightly to I, but I would not be surprised at all if Fernandez just goes on and run now. But Vietti, for me, will need a change of fortunes. Right now, we are going to move over now to MotoGP, to the big one. At this point of the day, just before the race, we were all kind of wondering, will this stand up to the Moto3 race? We had a brilliant Moto3 race, we had a brilliant Moto2 race, and we were kind of going, maybe MotoGP could be boring. Could Fabio get the whole shot? Could he clear off? But thankfully, we were all wrong. Maybe 20 minutes before the race started, we were hearing of spits of rain in the paddock and out the back end of the track, which usually seems to always rain at for some reason. It's never really the first sector, it's always the last sector. If you cast your memory back to 2017, Valentino's last win, very similar conditions, rain half the track, and again, it was just that back sector, wherever that little climate is there, it seems to rain. So we were hearing that. Now, it was, of course, declared a dry race. And the opening couple of laps, it settled into Pecco, Aleix and Fabio until Fabio's first error of the season. And I must apologise to Fabio because all season long we've been saying we don't know who's going to win this. We don't know. We can't really put a name in. Before, or in the last podcast, I should say, I pretty much nailed on that he'd win it. And he crashed twice in the one race. What did you make of the start of the race and Fabio's huge error?
Yeah, so the start of the race was fairly standard. Obviously, Bagnaia got a really good start, so he learnt from his mistake from, the last couple of races, really. Obviously, Sachsenring and Catalonia, really was him not quite getting the launch is what cost him. He managed to beat Fabio into turn 1, and then Fabio ran a little bit wide through turn 1 also, which allowed Aleix and Martin through. Fabio immediately got back past Martin, got briefly back in front of Aleix through the Strubben, but then Aleix fought back quite aggressively through the... is it the Mandavine or the Veenslang? I cannot remember the corner names. Yeah, the Veenslang, there you go. It was that corner, went back up the inside, got back in front of Fabio, and then it just sort of settled down a little bit, how it does first few laps. And then Bagnaia had about a second at the end of the first lap, but Aleix and Fabio were both sort of reeling him in. And then Fabio set the fastest lap of the race, closed up a lot to Aleix. He was in a position to, from the onboard cam, it looked like, alright, he's going to go up the inside to Strubben here. And he did. And the next thing, it cuts away from that. Fabio's on the floor, skittling into Aleix. Aleix is going through the gravel, and everyone is surprised because Fabio Quartararo doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't do rash passes at the start of races that cause them to fall off. But this time, it was so weird. It's one of those things where on the onboard camera, it looked like a complete, he looked close enough. It was kind of like, that's going to be a bit harsh because, Aleix actually got a very good run sort of out of the last part of the right, which put him a little bit further in front than Fabio probably thought. So it looked like it was going to be a pretty aggressive pass, but still going to be on. But from the off-board camera, you could see he was a bit too far behind. He couldn't get it stopped in time. He had way too much lean for the amount of brake he had on, so he just lost the front because obviously he was trying to not hit into Aleix. He tried to brake harder, just ended up crashing, hit Aleix. And obviously that set up probably one of the biggest storylines of the race, but we'll keep with Fabio for now. Fabio, it looked like initially he picked up the bike pretty quickly, but the damage was done. The bike was pretty damaged. There was a wing missing on the left-hand side. There's probably a footrest or something as well. The bike wasn't in the best condition. He tried to carry on for a few laps, came back in the pits basically to retire. The team told him there was rain coming and that... that he could potentially still pick up some points anyway if there's more crashes. So he headed back out, got out of the way once he got lapped, so he was a lap down. And then a few laps later, it cut to him sort of on the floor at the same corner where he crashed previously, ironically enough, with his bike on the other side of the track. And it's like, that's been a big one. And bizarre crash coming out of the Strubben. I think he must have had some sort of electronical issue after the crash because he just seemed to have no traction control and the bike really violently high-sided him. It was a pretty nasty accident there for Fabio. Fortunately, I think he's okay, but I do believe he has gone to the medical centre to have a look at his shoulder, because I think his shoulder was hurting him. So this could be a turning point in the championship if he's picked up an injury. Fortunately for him, there is a break for him to recover, but he's on the back foot a bit now. He's made a bit of an error. Could this be the start of 2020 version 2 and the unravelling of Fabio Quartararo?
Yeah, and I do agree. I'm going to start first with the first incident because, like you said, we were both watching obviously the world feed, and you see an onboard switch to the outside of turn 5, and you think, well, first glance I was like, he's after making a rash move. It was his own fault. Then I watched it back, and I'm on the fence of a racing incident. I think Aleix was because Fabio, after the 2 crashes, after the race, goes to the Aprilia box, apologizes profusely to Aleix. Aleix says, it was my fault, I didn't see you. And Fabio goes, oh, no, it was mine, this, that, and the other. And they kind of have a nice moment. He high-fives Aleix's son, Max, and they all have a nice moment, and this, that, and the other, and they carry on. And again, they're pretty good friends, them lot, so it was kind of nice that it didn't really affect them that much. And actually, in the end, kind of works out in Aleix's favour. We'll get to that in a second. But again, going back to the onboard, he wasn't ridiculously far behind. He does get up into... the move isn't rash. It's just that, unfortunately, Aleix tips in, and just before the contact, Aleix realises then, and Fabio has no choice but to basically lock the front and go down, and that's where the contact comes. If Aleix... I'm not going to blame Aleix at all, because it's always the rider behind who has to make the move clean, but if Aleix knew he was there and going for it, all he does is sit up, Fabio doesn't crash, they both carry on. He probably doesn't beat Fabio in the race, which is, again, as I will cover Aleix in a minute, is a bit of an odd one. But it's just an arson crash where 2 riders, different lines, they meet at one point, and unfortunately Fabio went down. But I'm quite glad that Aleix managed to lose 8 seconds to the leaders and rejoin. His second crash, definitely reckon there was something playing up there. I reckon, a lot of the commentators said that it was similar to his almost crash in Q2, but that was more him releasing the brake, trying to carry so much corner speed, and as soon as he touched the throttle, the front went, and he kind of had to save it. Whereas he was on the throttle, and it just snapped, and he went over the bars. And it was one of those where he didn't get thrown high, but he got thrown forward, and obviously his shoulder kind of probably went into the fairing and maybe off the bars or whatever, but he did take quite a whack. There is a pretty good picture out there of his bike in midair, and he's on his head, on the concrete. So he definitely looked pretty beaten up after it. I hope, for the champion's sake, there's nothing seriously wrong, but he does have a nice little break to rest. And I go for a racing incident because it wasn't, in my mind, a wild move, but at the same time, he didn't really need to go for it. Pecco wins. Pecco was 60, 70 points behind the championship. Him losing 5, 8 points to him, 9 points, whatever the gap is, not really huge. 25 points is going into a winter break, or a summer break, is something you go, well, yeah, that could snowball, that could start. We go back to Silverstone. He finishes P5, he has a bad weekend, he gets beaten up by the Power Ducati, Pecco wins, and then it starts. Then all the mental issues. He could easily turn back into 2020 Fabio. No, I don't believe he will. I did say as well after Aleix's moment in Catalonia that could be the end of his season. He could crumble from it, and I'm so glad that I didn't say it would happen, but it could, and I'm glad it didn't. And I don't believe either that Fabio will crumble and go back to 2020 where he won't be able to pass people, he'll crash, because I put that more down to the bike he was on. He wasn't comfortable, he couldn't ride it the way he wanted, more than a mental issue. Now, he did say obviously at the time, lots of mental issues, he said it got to his head, but I don't think that bike helped him in any way, shape or form. So, again, going back to a race incident, Fabio unlucky, Aleix, we're going to come to Aleix next. What a ride. Probably his best he's ever had. I'm trying to think of a better ride. Best in the dry. He had a special race in Aragon back on the Forward Jama racing Cal for the podium. But, that was just... It was Rossi 2003 Phillip Island. It was Rossi 2003 Catalonia. It was Marc Marquez 2012 Valencia. You go back to the back, you have series pace, you bite the screen until you cross the line and the finish. It was just so stunning, and it was so good to see, because Neil Hodgson made a great point in time. He goes, we're going to see. He kind of predicted it because Aleix went half a second quicker than anyone else on the next lap when he had a bit of clear track, and he said we're going to see Aleix's best ever his best ever GP performance, and we did. And I'm so happy for him. Reese, what do you make? I'm going to finally end my tangent, but what did you make of Aleix's? What did you make of the incident? Did you think it was sold down to Fabio? Did you reckon Aleix could have done slightly better? And what did you make of his whole comeback, the passing, the last chicane, the celebrations, everything?
Well, it is worth noting that Fabio has a long lap for Silverstone for the crash.
Does he?
Yeah.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they've penalised him. So, I mean,
interesting.
We can't exactly say, Stewart said it, so it must be right, because I think we know the opinions on that. But it does seem like, at least for that, and to be fair, in terms of collisions, they do tend to get the decisions right. Sometimes they just decide not to make them, like they did with Nakagami. But when they actually make a decision on a collision, usually it's, the right guy is usually penalised for it. Like I was saying before, I think it probably was Fabio's fault, to be honest. Aleix picked up as soon as he could, and as you know, you can't pick up too quickly when someone's on the inside. But yeah, he picked up as soon as he could. As you said as well, responsibility of the rider behind to make the pass clean. They were both very wide. They weren't really that close to the apex, so yeah, I'd say it's Fabio's move. Obviously, he got the penalty. Aleix, he apologised saying he didn't see him, but I'd imagine at that point it was straight after the race. Aleix probably still hasn't seen it back yet, so he's only remembering it from, when he experienced it at the time, and that would have been his shock. Oh, Fabio's at the inside, and then Fabio's crashed. He probably wouldn't think, oh, that was a rash move, because you probably wouldn't assume that from Fabio. So that's probably worth noting there. But yeah, Neil Hodgson did call it perfectly, saying we were going to see the best race of Aleix's career, and it definitely was. He was on it, his pace was on it, his moves were decisive. He started off a little slow, I thought. I think he struggled to sort of pass Rins, and who else was in that battle? There was the rider, I think it was a Di Antonio. I think he took a couple of laps to pass those two. But then once he did that, he seemed like he'd sort of found his places where he was quicker than other people. And then once he got the clean air, because he kind of came back on the track like right behind those guys, once he had the clean air, he could get into his own momentum. And that sometimes is enough to carry you forward. If you're so much faster, you just keep sticking to your lines. You get to behind a guy, you just open the throttle a bit more, pass him. And his moves were fantastic. He was closing on that lead group the whole time. I didn't even think he was probably going to get past Martin on the penultimate lap. I didn't think he had enough. All of a sudden, he was then in front of Martin, starting the last lap. Binder and Miller were going at it, and it's like, all of a sudden, if those two hold each other up too much, Aleix is going to be there. I was looking at the gap. I was like 2 tenths going into the last sector. That's close enough for a move. And I kind of saw it. They had in the little on the graphic in the corner, the onboard camera. They had Aleix, and I saw him sort of go. I saw Binder. I saw him go to the outside, and I thought, oh, he's going to get Binder. And then all of a sudden, you see in the background, he's coming through the chicane. He's got them both. It's like, what is this? It shows the replay. What a pass! So Binder was trying to go for a pass on Miller, and Aleix just went past the pair of them, completely outclassed them because he didn't even run wide. He just genuinely broke that much later than them on a tighter line. It was amazing. Jack Miller wasn't too happy about it, because he got pushed off the track a bit. But Jack Miller was dive bombing Aleix Espargaro in the first corner last week, so he can't really moan about someone dive bombing him. Especially it was the same guy that he was doing it to last time. Obviously, he didn't ever push Aleix off the track, to be fair, but that's one of those things. Yes, it's a last corner, isn't it? I mean, they would have both overtaken him anyway, so it doesn't really matter. So yeah, I can see why he's a bit annoyed, but it was just such a good race for Aleix. It was like Marc Marquez-esque, really, from the back. I wouldn't probably quite say it was Rossi Phillip Island, but it was...
Rossi Phillip Island was kind of a different race, but it was still... He had an objective, and he had to just ride above his... He just rode them laps, lap after lap after lap.
Aleix was a different realm than normal.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
To be honest, he was 8 seconds behind Bagnaia, I think, after he'd gone to the gravel. He finished like 1.5 behind, something like that.
Yeah.
He would have clearly won that race if he had not been punted off. Although, would it have fired him up in the same way? Would he have pushed quite as hard? Not sure, but he was definitely quicker than Bagnaia, although it's worth noting that he probably was in some sort of conservation mode with only having Bezzecchi on the GP21 behind him, but yeah, what a race from Aleix. What a pass as well at that last corner. That's the best part of the race for me. His pace was good throughout, his passes were decisive, but that was one of those passes that, that'll be remembered for a long time, that one.
Yeah, and I think the issue with Miller is he is getting passed into the final corner by Binder. Then Aleix goes up inside the Binder, so Binder can't turn in because there's an Aprilia there, which means Miller is kind of like has nowhere to go but off the track, and it's just one of those things. It's kind of a whole collective issue where nobody's really in the wrong. It's the last corner; they're both going to try it. Neither, like, it wasn't that Binder was out of control. Binder would have got the move done if Aleix isn't there. Aleix gets the move done on Binder. It's two clean passes. It's just really unfortunate Miller has two bikes underneath him and he can't go anywhere but off the track. And he's probably more annoyed kind of deep down himself because he did have a go at Maverick into that chicane. Yeah, I was into the chicane on the penultimate lap.
Yeah.
And the front end, I was watching you. Like, when you can see the front forks kind of juddering and skipping and chattering, and the front tire moving like that, I can only imagine what it feels like on the bike. He did well to keep it on track. Lost a lot of time to Maverick, and then let Binder have a run on him, and that was kind of the whole thing. So I reckon Jack was one lap away from a podium, ended up behind the others. I reckon that was probably really what he thought at. And it kind of probably just hurt him a bit more.
Yeah, it was weird.
Again, Aleix was just stunning. Into that corner, he was making moves into turn one. He was passing people everywhere, and he just had so much pace. And it was brilliant because for a while in GP now, we don't see them races. Like, obviously, we don't see races where riders that are way quicker go backwards and then come forwards. But we don't see much overtaking. He made it look like it was like Valentino, when Valentino was qualified 12th and finished 4th every week and finished P2, where he could just pass so smoothly and consistently, and it didn't seem like that he was over the limit. It was just he looked like he was just so much quicker than everyone else. And I think Assen being one of those flowy tracks, we didn't talk once about Michelin's tyres, we didn't talk about ride height devices, the aero. It was just good riding, good riders on the best bikes, and I think it was good to see, and I think it shows that we could probably get rid of these gimmicks and the sport would be much better for it. But we are going to move on now to, that was Aleix in P4, by the way. We're going to get better for Aprilia. We're going to go to Maverick Vinales' first podium on a V4 on the Aprilia. I, for one, was over the moon. I like Maverick. I've liked him through the classes. I love his riding style. I love watching him ride a bike. There's some riders out there, you'll always just like watching them ride. Casey Stoner, Marquez, Lorenzo. Some people just have that style where you can just watch them go round and round and round. Top Rack is another one. And he's just one of those riders. I just love his riding style. He's very aggressive, elbows out. He's just, he picks the bike up. Could watch him all day. And on that Aprilia, he's finally getting to click. I know he's got a podium. Probably should have had a podium last week, but the fact it's only been a week later and he's managed to do it, I'm so happy for him, considering it was last year he came P2 there, and there was a whole rigmarole last year over, well, I didn't change the bike from Sachsenring and I was last, and again P2. He was in such a bad place, and I'm so happy because he came into the podium, he thanked his beautiful family, he thanked Aprilia probably 60 times, and yeah, it was just brilliant to see. I was so happy for Maverick. What did you make of Top Gun's performance?
Yeah, I was really cheering him on. I wanted him to win. Once he got past Binder, I was like, go on, get Bezzecchi, go on, get Bagnaia. I was really rooting for him. Unfortunately, didn't quite have that level of pace, but that's kind of one of those rides that builds confidence. We spoke about it last week. He got very unfortunate, but once he got off the bike, he gave a thumbs up to the mechanics and stuff. It was a confidence builder. He feels at home in that team. He's clearly so much happier than he was in Yamaha. Whatever was happening there, I don't think that's to be fair, probably Yamaha's problem. I don't think it's, I don't think their team is a bad team or anything like that, but they just didn't gel together. They didn't gel together from the very beginning. And now that he's in an environment where he's with his friends, he's always with his family, he's got his daughter, and that his life has changed significantly because of that, I suppose, is his wife or girlfriend. Either way, he's with her every weekend, and he's in he's got his one of his best mates on the other side of the garage. He just seems so much happier now that the performance is there as well. He's got a podium. You can't really say that switching was bad because he was only ever really going to get podiums on the Yamaha, maybe the odd win. But then, we've still got half a season left. We got a track that's really good for Aprilia, a track that's really good for Vinales coming up next. So you never know, and he's going to continue to get better because he's still not mastered that Aprilia yet. So yeah, it was just fantastic to see him. He was so happy. He was telling the team, he said it was like the greatest team. They're so good. He deserves to, this team deserves to be on the podium every week. He wants to do it. P3 and P4. they definitely want 1-2 next. That's what they're going for next. They're going for a 1-2 finish. And honestly, as much as I love Aleix, as much as he was so good this weekend, I think Viñales is a better rider. So I think once he gets sorted, I think we'll probably see that pretty on the top step a few more times. So yeah, great building block there for Viñales. So happy to see him on the podium.
And Viñales usually goes with a softer tyre, because if he could just get qualifying sorted
on the first lap
and the first kind of opening corners and just getting settled right, God only knows what he could actually do, because he seems to usually have great pace in FP4. He's usually there for a Friday. He's usually fast in a warm-up. So it's clear he can ride the bike quite well. Obviously, he has a bit of adjusting still to do to the V4. Like, we need to forget that a year ago he was still on the Yamaha. He hasn't fully completed a year on the bike. To go from a Yamaha, which is so set in its ways, to an Aprilia that's constantly changing and being developed, it'll take time. It'll take more than 12 months for him to really adapt. I think, given the rest of this year, I'm quite happy now that he's got the contract already. I'm quite happy that he's managed to get the podium and kind of pay back Aprilia's trust in him. Because there was kind of some murmurs coming out of the Aprilia paddock or the Aprilia garage there just before the contracts were signed that things weren't all as rosy as we thought, and we were kind of going, not again, Maverick, please, come on. And then they signed a contract to re-sign him, and we were kind of, I personally was kind of going, they must see something outside of free practice 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the race. They must see something else other than the on track, maybe in the data or something. Just something that's there that we can't see, that they believe in him. And probably should have been a podium last week out. If not, he would have got a top 5. Brilliant result for him. Again, he came in, he didn't seem happy, obviously, but he was appreciative of the hard work from his team, the mechanics, and of the project they're building. And I think it's coming together for Maverick, and that podium wasn't a weird race, it wasn't a wet race, it was genuine pace. He had to pass people for it. He had to get there. It was a race that he genuinely was there because of his pace, and it's great to see. And as you mentioned, Silverstone next, track he won in 2016, his first ever win there. I was at that race. He cleared off. Nobody could touch him. So maybe this could be the start of something special for Maverick. But we'll go on now to someone else who's got their first podium on a new bike. Bez. VR46 first podium. They've had a front row, they've had bits of everything, but now they have they're only missing now a race win, and it's only been their 10th race, so our 11th including this one. He is growing in stature every week. He's one of those riders, you could say, never amazing in the lower categories. He went close in Moto 3 to a title. He went close to Moto 2, but he was never one of those standard riders that you go, he's a Jorge Martin, he's a Joan Mir, he's a Fabio Quartararo. He wasn't one of those. He came through and has developed into a very, very good MotoGP rider, and a Ducati around Assen. That is a fair stint, and again, I was delighted from it. It kind of all comes back together. Rossi has been most dominant over the years at Assen. His last win was at Assen, and his team's first podium, of course, had to come here. It was a bit special. What did you make of VR46 weekend, and especially Bez's podium?
Yeah, the team has really been on the up, hasn't it, the last couple of races? It's actually been Marini that's been a good run of form. I think he had like 3 top 5s in a row. 3 top 6s in a row, sorry, I think. And he almost got the podium in Sachsenring, but obviously, unfortunately for him, it's Bezzecchi that's got it this week. On the older bike as well, so the older bike still seems to be somewhat working. I feel like it's one of those seasons that's a bit weird, because that bike seems amazing at some tracks. Sometimes it doesn't seem so good, but Bezzecchi has been the fastest rookie all year. He's crashed a lot, but he's also been really fast. It's kind of the Marquez strategy almost. And yeah, it's really nice to see him up on the podium. Really good for Rossi. 1-2 really for the Rossi camp, with Bagnaia first and himself in second. So good for them. I guess technically this is the VR46's first season, but they did kind of were in it last year with having like that deal with the sponsor Armour, and that's the sort of the team they've bought. I imagine some of the staff transferred across and that, but it's good to see them up there. They seem to really be finding a lot of form. Ducati really seem to have the some a lot of young talent. I know that Bezzecchi is brought there through the Rossi side rather than the Ducati side, but I would be very surprised if we don't see him on a Ducati contract for next year or in future, just to try and keep him within the factory. And in terms of the equipment next year as well, they're going to have is going to be a bit of a predicament. I would say at the minute you would give Bezzecchi the factory bike and let Marini have what's left. So a really good podium for Bezzecchi there. Second place as well, not a third place. So straight up there, and it did look like he could challenge for the win at one point, but he didn't quite have that pace.
Yeah, absolutely. He kind of actually, there was so much drama with. We were all watching what Fabio could do, and then he crashed the second time. I was like, yeah, it's the end of his race. We were all watching Aleix come through. Bezzecchi was kind of like under the radar. He was P2, and we were kind of just okay with that. And then you realise, like, with 3 laps to go, like, he's a rookie. If this was like a couple of years ago, you'd be like crossing everything and hoping he doesn't make a mistake, but he looked like he was like his 5th, 6th season. He was just bringing home a race. He looked like Zarco in Sachsenring. He just seemed steady, smooth, was quick, was consistent. There was no big mistakes. He didn't run off. There wasn't any warnings. He was just nailed that race, and he was so good. And it was just brilliant to see. But we are going to move on now to the other VR46 Academy. Technically, he's not actually in the team. Pecco led into turn 1, led out of the last corner, 25 points. Is he back in the title chase?
No. To put it bluntly, no. Because you were saying earlier about how Fabio didn't need to do it because Pecco was like 60, 70 points behind. Pecco is now 60, 70 points behind, even after this. Before that, he was like 90 points behind. So
right.
It was the commentators, they were all saying, oh, is this Pecco coming back? He's still like 66 points behind. Yes, if Fabio crashes like 3 more times, then yeah, maybe. But I can't see that happening. So if you ask me, no. Because we were saying that he was out of the championship after Catalonia pretty much. He then crashed his Sachsenring again. And we're like, oh, okay, he's definitely out now. Well, it's negated that. We'd already said he was out of the championship anyway. So, yeah. I mean, you might disagree when we come back to your opinion in a minute. But for me, Bagnaia not going to win the championship. It is between Aleix and Quartararo. And even still, Quartararo still has a pretty healthy lead. Just under a race wins worth. And, I reckon it's between those 2 riders. Quartararo was a bit of a bonehead move today, but fortunately, I guess for him, it affected his main rival as well, because if Aleix had picked up 25 points, then you'd be talking a different story. But, yeah, I reckon those 2 could still go at it. There's, not that many points between those 2, and if Aleix has some good races, Fabio has some good races, I reckon those 2 could go right down to the wire with the championship, because the gap is now under a race win's worth, but nah, Pecco's too far behind. I'm pretty sure he's still behind Zarco in the championship. No one's talking about Zarco being in the championship, are they? So, yeah, he's not. As far as I'm concerned, he's not in the hunt. I could be proven wrong. I might look like an idiot. Valencia, Pecco Bagnaia, 2022 world champion, but I cannot say it. I just can't.
Just to put some numbers to them facts. Pecco is 66 points off. He's 4th in the championship. He's 1 point ahead of Enea Bastianini, who we haven't mentioned in today's podcast. I don't know where he finished. I don't think he was in today's race. I didn't see him. He's been nowhere for weeks.
Yeah, he's languishing lately. This weekend he was really poor because he was slower than Digi this weekend.
Yeah,
I don't know what's happened.
He's been slower than Digi for the last couple of weekends. If we think of Digi's uprising, Bastianini's come. He's been probably the slowest Ducati.
And Martin has been quicker again. It's like they've swapped.
And yeah, it's exactly, it swings and roundabouts. They've come back. Martin had a good race, decent race considering he had an infection in his arm. We didn't mention that today, but a small infection in his arm, and that was fatigued more than pain, but he did struggle at mid-race distance. But again, back to the championship standings. 172 points for Fabio. Aleix 21 points, so a good chunk less than the race win. Zarco another 30 odd points, so the gap really. Zarco, he's not going to win it. He's pretty much he's 58 points behind to be exact. Pecco back and forth. So overall, I still agree, even though I had the points wrong a while ago, I still agree that Pecco isn't going to win it. The only way I could see it is if Yamaha have mechanicals. I don't think Fabio's going to crash. Like, today wasn't a Fabio crash. It was an unfortunate incident between two riders that ended in Fabio crashing, is the best way to put it, in my personal opinion.
Yeah, it wasn't
no,
like
not
he
everyone
just
agrees
crashed
with
on
me.
his own. He was making a move.
Yeah, exactly.
It wasn't like
He
Bagnaya's
didn't
crash last weekend. It was,
Yeah, or wasn't like Le Mans where he
wasn't
got
like
he
all
was
Bagnaya's
rattled
crashes, basically.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was. He wouldn't have crashed. Oh, it's going to sound stupid if Aleix wasn't there, but yeah, he wouldn't have. It wasn't a. It was a mistake, but not a mistake. Again, English is my second language, as I always say. So it's all time. Here we go. But I don't see him making many mistakes. No, I do see him struggling at certain races. Silverstone with a long lap. That isn't a podium, guaranteed. It'll be a hell of a race though, because Silverstone is a fast track, and overall it's going to be high corner speed. You'd imagine something good will happen there for Fabio if he didn't have the long lap. But with a long lap, thrown behind two Aprilias, thrown behind Zarco, thrown behind Brad Miller, you never know what's going to happen. He could then make his first actual mistake of the season. So it's interesting to see, really. But yeah, we don't know. But I still think Fabio has the championship in his bag. I think this is. I don't even say it's his mistake, because I don't. It just he wasn't. He only crashed because Aleix turned it on him, without saying Aleix's fault. It's kind of hard to explain it. But anyway, I think we've rambled on for long enough. We've covered everything. We have 5 weeks now between Assen and Silverstone. I don't know what I'm going to do for 5 weeks myself. I might take up golf or something, or archery, or I don't know. 5 weeks is a long time. I wish I could go on holidays for 5 weeks to Ibiza or go to Milan or something like that. But unfortunately, I have to work for the 5 weeks and I have to do other things. But anyway, we're going to end it there. I hope you have enjoyed it. We shall catch you all in 5 weeks' time. Thanks for watching.